I'm Destiny Barletta. I'm the Director for Alumni Connections in Career Education, and we are always really excited to provide an opportunity for alums to come in this kind of intimate conversation to talk with students about their careers and the almost never straightforward way that they have kind of ended up where they are. So we are very grateful to Marisa Buchanan for being with us, and I'm really eager to hear what she has to share. So I'll kind of ask some questions along the way to get the conversation going, but I'll begin by letting Marisa introduce herself and tell us about a bit about kind of how she would describe how she got to where she is from where you students are now.
Thank you so much, Destiny. And thanks to Laura, too, for connecting recently and inviting me to do this. It's such a pleasure to come back and speak with you all and share a little bit about, my life and, my experience at Wellesley and tell you what I've been doing for the past, almost 24 years now, which is hard to believe. I have to say, thinking about sort of being in your shoes today and where I was at your time, I couldn't have guessed in a million years how my career would have tracked out. A lot of risks and surprises, which I think was a key theme. And I also think a lot about the things that I sort of would go back and tell myself if I had the knowledge that I had today based on where I've ended up. So I guess I will start by just sort of saying it will all be okay, even when you think it won't. Because I had a lot of nervous days and nervous nights thinking about sort of career and life and what came next after Wellesley. So I thought what I would do is actually just start and give you a little bit of sort of view into who I am and where I came from, and what I've been up to the past 20 plus years, and really sort of welcome any and all questions. That's, I think, what makes these discussions interesting. So I'm actually dialing in today. I'm actually in London. I moved to London a year and a half ago from the United States. So American. I grew up in California and then came to the East Coast, obviously Wellesley, for college. And I ended up staying my whole sort of career and adult life after Wellesley on the East Coast, principally in New York City and Washington, D.C. I've sort of bounced back and forth between the two cities, working for several different companies and organizations in the environmental sustainability space, but really working at the nexus of environmental sustainability and business. And moved to London a year and a half ago when I decided to take a huge risk, change companies. So I joined BP, but specifically to work, in their efforts to help transition the company from an integrated oil company to an integrated energy company. So really helping the company shift to cleaner energy. And what drew me to this opportunity was, I've always been somebody who has, call it, sort of worked from the inside and knew that I would get a whole new perspective and vantage point by actually coming to work within an energy company, to really better understand both the opportunities, but also the challenges as we do that. So happy to talk more about that. But going back to me, so as I said, I grew up in California, just south of San Francisco, came east for college, came by myself, actually. My parents put me on a plane and I showed up at Wellesley, and it was the start of, an incredible learning and life adventure. My best friends, who I'm still in touch with today, are from Wellesley, and they're all doing very, very different things, and also all around the world. I ended up studying political science and focused in a concentration in political theory. I was really interested in sort of that topic intellectually. And I have to say, it actually ended up serving me sort of really well in my career. One of the things that I think increasingly gets sort of not enough appreciation and value in the business world is the value of critical thinking and good communication. I cannot tell you how important it is. And I often sort of joke with my colleagues that some of the worst sort of bureaucratic strife and internal confusion, poor communication is at the root of all of that. So I think all of the critical thinking and writing and communication skills that I learned at Wellesley were hugely valuable. So that is something that, looking back on, I have a absolutely huge appreciation for. So studying political science, candidly, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I graduated, and I graduated in 2001. When I came out, the dot-com bubble had just burst, and many of my friends who had offers to join investment banks and consulting firms had their offers rescinded. Everyone was sort of running around going, can I just get any job to like keep me afloat? I ended up going to work for a law firm in Boston. I was there for about 10 months, and candidly, that job was just to pay the bills. And as I was in Boston living with a couple friends, I literally like got a futon and was like renting their living room because I had nowhere else to go. Kept thinking to myself, you know what? I think like the next sort of step for me has got to be to go to New York. That was a big place for people to go, and probably still is. And one day I got a call from one of my best friends from Wellesley who said that she had just gotten a job in publishing and she was getting an apartment in Brooklyn. And I said, great, get space because I'm coming with you. And I ended up leaving the law firm and moving to New York. Didn't have a job, but I went straight to a temp agency and said, basically, like, I've got to earn some money. Can you get me some jobs? And they said, absolutely. But actually, we have a permanent placement opportunity that we think you might be interested in. And this permanent placement opportunity was to join a large family foundation in New York in their environmental grant making program. And I had done, when I was at Wellesley, I had done an internship between my junior and senior years working for a trade association out in California that was essentially representing the voice of the tech and business community in California on issues of sort of quality of life. So things like environment, affordable housing, public transportation. There were, many, many businesses that were trying to grow and attract talent to the Bay Area, but were grappling with the fact that, they were trying to hire people who couldn't afford to live in the Bay Area. How do you tackle these quality of life challenges? So I had spent some time working on public transportation and smart growth issues. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that term, but it was like a brand new term back in the early 2000s. And so the foundation actually did a lot of work on smart growth in the environment program. And candidly, I needed a job, and I interviewed, and they ended up hiring me. And that honestly was the sort of thing that sort of set me on the path to where I am today. I spent 3 years as a program assistant supporting a couple grant makers. We were making grants to a whole range of environmental nonprofits, doing work on a range of issues, everything from supporting the growth of the sustainable forestry market, so things like the Forest Stewardship Council, again, sort of super brand new back then, to efforts around promoting smart growth in the US, energy efficiency, and then also market-based solutions to climate change. So this was also the time where some of you might be familiar with the term socially responsible investing. Triple bottom line investing was actually the sort of original term. It was triple bottom line investing, then it was sustainable investing, then it sort of transitioned into ESG, which has also been a relatively recent phenomenon. And it was a time in the world where there was growing recognition and interest of the role that business could play in helping to address some of the world's most critical challenges. And climate change was starting to get a lot of attention. The European Union's emissions trading scheme had just gotten up and running, and there were a whole range of businesses that were starting to enter this market. Long story short, I got super interested in energy and climate as a topic. knowing that, energy is something that we and the world all need. It becomes a challenge of how do you produce more of it, but do so in an increasingly clean and responsible way? How do you do so affordably and reliably, thinking about, security and access and all these things? It's a fascinating sort of optimization challenge. I decided to go back to graduate school to do a graduate degree, and I ended up doing a master's of public administration at Columbia's School of International and Public Affairs. While I was there, I ended up interning for a gentleman who actually was one of our grantees at the foundation. And when I came out with my MPA and I did a focus on environmental economics, finance, and policy, he hired me. He actually went from this nonprofit organization to a clean energy company that was scaling up, trying to build wind and small run-of-river hydro projects, principally in Latin America, but they were also doing some development work in the US, specifically around methane capture. So I joined that company. I was there for about a year. It was a fascinating ride. That company ended up getting sold and acquired by a much larger company. So I ended up leaving and then went to another small startup that was working with oil and gas and coal mining companies to help them reduce fugitive methane emissions. I don't know that I ever thought I would know anything about fugitive methane emissions, but they're candidly all over the place. You look at our oil and gas system and mines, and there are a lot of opportunities to capture and also clean and use this methane much more productively. I was running around with a lot of folks in places like West Virginia and Wyoming and Colorado. This was also around the time that President Obama had just been elected, and I would say there was not a lot of love for these businesses for what the Obama administration was trying to do, but it was a really fascinating learning opportunity for me to think about how, as a business, you pitch a company that might not be sort of driven by the desire to mitigate climate change, but they do care about things like using resources responsibly and efficiently. So that experience taught me a lot. Long story short, I ended up sort of leaving after a few years. There were some challenges in that market, in that company. And I ended up making my way to JPMorgan Chase, where I spent sort of the last sort of 10 and a half years of my career before I came to JPMorgan. And before I got to BP, and I got to JPMorgan because I was recruited by a guy who I met and knew from my days working at the foundation. So one of the key threads that I would say stands out in my career is the fact that relationships make a huge difference. And I would say that actually who you work for matters more than anything. It matters more than the company name, the title, the role that you have. Working for people who see your potential, but more importantly, who are there to coach and support you. And really be your eyes and ears, thinking about, where and how you can move and how you can develop. There are people throughout my career that I've worked for that I still keep in touch with today, and honestly feel like I would not be here were it not for them. When I joined JPMorgan, that was in 2012, and this was still at a time when sustainability was not yet mainstream. A lot of folks in the bank would ask, literally, did I count napkins in the dining hall? Because they just could not comprehend why sustainability would matter to a bank. And our goal was really to, I think, work with people internally to convince them that this is something that our clients increasingly care about. And if the bank cares about sustainability and can show all the things that it is doing, not only within its own internal operations, but importantly, how we can support our clients on their sustainability journey, that actually becomes a differentiating value proposition. It actually becomes something that can help bankers win business. And yes, there might be instances where, we need to say, look, for XYZ reason, the risk reward for financing X activity doesn't make a lot of sense and can create a lot of risk for us. ultimately, people sort of in businesses buy in when they sort of see, okay, here's how we can grow and serve our clients better and more efficiently if we can actually, demonstrate what we're doing and why it's valuable. So long story short, spent over 10 years there. We were leading strategy, the development of initiatives and commitments around green and energy transition related financing. I led all of our work around sustainability and ESG reporting. I was pleased to see actually that JPMorgan yesterday released its latest ESG report. And I had many conversations actually convincing folks that that was a report that we should produce. So it's been going for now almost 10 years strong. And also got to do a lot of engagement with clients across the bank, ranging from our, private wealth clients to investment banking clients and corporate banking clients who, needed advice on sustainability, trends and issues impacting their sector, how they can, continue to think ahead and evolve, and also be responsive to evolving regulatory policy trends, trends around, mandatory and, voluntary reporting, many, many things. And I also did a lot of work with our investor relations team on shareholder engagement, which was probably one of the more fascinating aspects of my job. So candidly, really just I got to see everything. Did a lot of work with, all of our senior leaders across the bank. In many cases, pitching why it was good business for us to do things and take risks. And it wasn't always easy, but it has taught me a lot about how to think about sustainability from a very sort of commercial angle, and ultimately how to be influential, how to drive change within these large organizations. So, as I said, was doing all this work for JPMorgan, was spending most of my time on energy and energy transition related issues. But I realized that when you work for a bank, you're not actually the one doing the work of energy transition yourself, it's your clients. So I started to think, my next job, like I would actually really love to go work for an energy company and do this from the inside. And I ended up getting recruited by BP. And it also entailed a move to London, which was a big shift. I never studied abroad when I was at Wellesley, unlike many of my friends who, really loved it and I think got a lot out of it. And I thought, well, I'm in my early 40s. I guess it's not too late to take this chance and uproot myself. Sort of figured like, what's the worst that can happen? Ultimately, it's like, you can always come back. I always know that there are many things that I can do. But this is actually the time when I want to keep pushing myself and keep learning and keep challenging myself. And that is also something that I think I really learned at Wellesley, which was, actually the way that you learn and you grow is by pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And yes, it can be incredibly painful, but having the right support network around you, friends, family, all of that can make a world of difference. So 1.5 years in, it has definitely been challenging. Adjusting to the UK, just personally, like I find business culture is actually very different here than in the US. So I have had to learn and understand a lot about sort of how protocols are different here. I would say people are much more indirect here in the UK versus than in the US. And the company's going through a fascinating transition where, again, we are investing in new assets and learning what it takes to build and operate those successfully. We're learning some of the tough lessons that come from changing regulatory landscapes. You think certain incentives and pathways are clear, and then all of a sudden you've got a shift in policy or regulation that can really sort of turn your investments upside down. And I've had to navigate coming into a large organization at a senior level where I don't have the benefit of having, been there for 20, 25 years, where you sort of have all the history and you have all the relationships. You've got to build all that from scratch, while navigating these new investment challenges, learning your team, keeping your team motivated, and amidst uncertainty and challenge. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. I mean, again, just sort of coming back to some sort of lessons, I think about like how much time I spent honestly at Wellesley agonizing about what I would do and whether I would be okay. It did turn out to be okay. It certainly was not always easy. But I think I benefited from the fact that I was willing to take some real risks. Again, I think about just like moving to New York without a job, joining JPMorgan. I was living in DC at the time and decided to move back to New York. I mean, moving to London, these are all things I was like, I have no idea if I'm going to be the biggest failure. I'm going to give it a shot. Also sort of taking opportunities when I didn't know exactly what they would lead to or how they would pan out. But thinking again about, hey, if I'm being recruited by somebody that I really respect and trust, I'm going to take that risk and go with them on this journey. Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways sort of like not planning too far ahead has been advantageous for me, because in the environmental sustainability field, things are evolving so quickly. There is not one linear career path. And I say that all the time. And in many cases, unlike investment banking or consulting, there's sort of not many structured opportunities for young people to get their foot in the door if they want to work, in this sector. So yeah, I think it requires some patience and creativity and sort of really thinking about sort of what you want to do and how you like spending your time. There are a lot of different things that people can do in this industry. Working for an NGO, working for a company, but even within those, I mean, there are a lot of different sort of career tracks you can take. So would be really curious to hear what you all are doing and studying and what you think you want to do next. I should also just say that Wellesley didn't even create an environmental studies major until I don't know how many years after I graduated. And again, it wasn't a thing. So it's really great to see. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now because I feel like I've been rambling for a while. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's on your mind? What are your questions?
I have plenty of questions and I want the students to ask their questions. So Julia, thank you.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for hosting this. I'm so excited. My name is Julia. I'm currently a senior at Wellesley. My major is history and I'm an environmental studies minor. And yeah, I'm also currently, as you're talking about, currently in a place where I feel like I'm stressing every other day about life after Wellesley. And I was excited to hear about your career because I kind of came into Wellesley with plans of law school. And it was just kind of that was like, I just assumed that's what I would do. And then I did go abroad to the UK as a junior. And I loved it so much. And now I was like, oh, I want to live abroad again. I wanted to work abroad. And I was like, that's not really compatible with a US law degree. So now I'm pivoting and really exploring options. I'm still waiting to hear back. I've applied to some grad schools in Europe, mostly Germany, as well as some jobs and working in volunteer opportunities in Europe as well. And I wanted to hear about, especially you talked about it a little bit, the challenges of moving to a new place. And I did have to do that when I studied abroad. But I think when you're studying abroad and you're going to a university, it's full of students, it's full of people who, I don't know, it seems like it's a lot easier to adjust, I guess, to life at a new university than to a new job where it's not necessarily as, I guess, not as social. I don't know if that makes sense, but not as like you're kind of in this new city all by yourself. And
Yeah.
just, like how you kind of, since you've done so many moves, like how you approach that, and if you have any tips for like getting comfortable in a new city, meeting new people, things like that.
That's a really great question. And it's super interesting actually, because when I think about like my other sort of closest friends from Wellesley, most of them have not moved around as much as I have. The one exception is one of my friends actually works for the State Department. She's been a diplomat for over 20 years. So she's done many moves, and she also has a family. So she's now been moving with her kids, and her kids are now getting to be close to high school age. She was placed actually last August. She's now working for the Vatican, which is super interesting. So I saw her in London a few weeks ago, and I'm going to go to Italy in a bit to go see her, which is nice. But okay, advice. So I would say a few things. London was actually sort of lucky for me because working for JPMorgan, that was a global company. And JP has a very big footprint in London. And so I did have a network of people here through that. And I had traveled to London over many years with JPMorgan. So it felt like a more familiar place. And through some other friends, I've, had sort of a network of people, but it's different. I came here by myself. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I brought my cat over from the US, and that was quite an experience. So it's been fun to have him. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot that takes getting used to, sort of the daily to, again, like all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I'm working for an English company and things are just totally different than an American company. I actually travel a lot for work. So I've got team here in London, but I also have folks on my team in Chicago, Houston, and Singapore. So last year I probably spent many more hours on a plane than I would have liked to. But on the other hand, you get to visit some incredible places, and again, get to see, working in Singapore is also very different than working in London or in Houston and Chicago. So I've really been thinking about it as it's an incredible sort of life and learning experience. I think I will probably go back to the US at some point. I sort of don't know exactly when or how soon, but I feel like that continues to be my anchor. I bought a little house in Washington, D.C. in 2018, and I decided to hold on to that again because it sort of, for me, it feels like my home and my anchor. At the end of the day, like I think it's one of those things you just got to sort of feel out for yourself. If you feel like you want to go abroad, like seize that, do it while you can, and you can always come back to the States. And if you feel like in your career you want an opportunity to work abroad, I would say like think about working for a company that actually has that sort of global footprint, and also has a track record of moving people to different locations. I will say like BP is a company that has a really strong track record of doing that. And they do that explicitly to get people, experience actually, in many cases, like in energy, they actually move people to different assets, but it also gives people an incredible breadth of experience that as you sort of move up call it corporate ladder, having those different experiences and perspectives are really valuable. I would also just say, there are actually, I think, a lot of opportunities for lawyers in the environmental sustainability space. We work with an incredible team of lawyers at BP who, many of them are helping to structure, big acquisitions and transactions. When I was at JPMorgan, I worked with a lot of lawyers who were working on like corporate governance related issues. Again, also a lot of sort of, legal issues related to specific financial transactions, things related to corporate disclosure and regulatory compliance. There's so many regs and rules coming out around ESG issues nowadays. And I would say like, I think the legal profession in some ways is like sort of coming to terms with all of this. So there's a lot there if you feel like you want to do something at the nexus of sustainability and law.
Thank you so much.
Haru.
Hello. Well, nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Hi,
for the
Karu. How are you?
speech. I'm good. I'm good. Well, first of all, it was really comforting to hear you say that how you've experienced so much and you think things are gonna be all right. Because I'm sort of in the dilemma myself. I'm a computer science and anthropology major, but I got a market research internship for a climate tech company. I've been working for them for a while, and this is energy is a space I really want to break into, but also there's it's a difficult job market this year, and I think a lot of entry level positions they're asking for more experience, like 1 year or two. And since you mentioned earlier about sort of pivoting around, I was wondering if you were in my shoes, like facing the situation when you're graduating and you still can't find something that's what you want to do. Like,
Yeah.
how would you sort of go around and get there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's any comfort, I will say, when I ended up going to work for the law firm after college, and I reached out to them because I had interned one summer. And I sort of knew, like, I was like, I didn't have an option not to work. I needed to work and earn money. And so I thought, this is a place that I know that they would be happy to have me back. I was sort of like, this is what I've got to do in the interim while I look to find something more permanent. So I actually sort of took some comfort, I think, in sort of knowing that, like that move that I made at the law firm, like I knew that wasn't going to be forever. And I think that's totally okay. It's totally okay. And I know that at the time it might not feel okay, but it's completely okay. I think, actually, like, I wish that I had just not given myself such a hard time back then, honestly. I really do. Do what you need to do. If you need a job, take a job and just keep exploring, keep talking to people. Something will come along. And I'm also a big believer in, is like, sometimes you just have to get your foot in the door and have an opportunity to show people what you can do. So, get your foot in the door. And I know that the job market is hard right now. And it's hard in the sustainability and environmental field, and even energy. Things can sort of be cyclical and go up and down. And yeah, getting your foot in the door is sometimes just what you have to do.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't know if that's reassuring or not reassuring, but
it is, the situation, there's nothing you can say to change it, but it's definitely helpful that you told me, you wish you didn't give yourself such a hard time. I think I'm going to start doing that too.
Yeah. And I think too, like, I think there are some people who sort of keep waiting for what they view as the perfect opportunity. And I'll tell you, there's absolutely no perfect opportunity out there. And it's so easy, like, once you're in a place, to sort of go, oh, the grass is greener on the other side. Some things might be greener, but, a lot of times things aren't greener. And I think now, I look at all of my different sort of career experiences. I've had some absolutely amazing, mostly amazing experiences. And the things that I've learned the most from have honestly been the ones that have been have felt the most challenging as I've been going through them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a first year. I'm hoping to major in physics and minor in cinema and arts. The career path that I'd hopefully like to go into is helping create nuclear energy to be more economically efficient, and just going into sustainable energy in general. I was wondering how like what advice you have on building relationships and maintaining them.
Mm.
I know one of the big factors of me wanting to go to Wellesley is the alumni network and how the relationships you can build with that, and if you've used that or any just advice in building relationships.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I haven't come across many Wellesley grads in this sort of sector that I'm in, which I sometimes think is surprising. I come across a lot of folks from Columbia, but I would say like there's definitely not the sort of, alumni sort of just community in the same way. So in terms of building relationships, I mean, I've always found, I have found myself looking for people that I like, call it, that I've been working with, who I sort of go like, I want to be like you one day. And then do what you can to get to know them, and even better, to the extent that you can work with them directly so they see what you're capable of doing. That, I think, is actually something that can create a really powerful sort of mentor and sponsor relationship. And I've been really lucky to have some key people throughout my career who have been incredibly strong sponsors. And that's so key, because they're the people who, you might not sort of, in many cases, actually, like, they're the people you don't work for directly, but they're the people who sit next to, call it, your boss, or they're your boss's peers, your colleagues' peers, and they're the ones who are sort of like keeping their eye out for you, going, hey, I saw you over here and you did this really well, but can I give you some feedback? Or, can I give you some suggestions around how you might want to approach that meeting or presentation? They're the people that you can go to bounce ideas off of in a safe space, get that sort of career and life advice. Actually, after this, I'm having dinner tonight with a woman. She was a managing director at JPMorgan when I joined as a vice president, and I sat outside of her office, and I was like completely scared of her for the longest time, because she had such incredibly high standards, but I was so impressed by her, and she sort of took me under her wing. Anyway, long story short, I ended up becoming promoted to managing director. She left. She's now the head of sustainability for American Airlines. And here I am at BP, and she's in London for an airline conference. So, we're still great friends, and I still consider her like, a huge mentor. So I think it really, like, it's the kind of thing, like, you don't necessarily gel with everyone, but find the people who you feel like you've got some kinship with, and, the people who are sort of going to look out for you. And I would also say a big part of, I think, developing those relationships is asking those people questions. I think people really want to help. And I find like that can actually be a really sort of powerful way to create a strong bond, and you get a lot from it.
Thank you. I really appreciate the advice.
Julia's hand is raised again, and then Maeve shared in the chat just a message, thank you for coming. She's at work right now, so she's not able to turn on her microphone, but she's interested in knowing about how, and this is a good question, I was going to ask this as well, so thanks, Maeve. Your kind of process around graduate school and understanding kind of when and where and which program do you remember enough about that? Maeve says, how did you decide to do an MPA specifically, especially when, and I know this was a number of years ago, now the kind of graduate landscape around sustainability is much vaster. But like, how did that process?
Yes. Great question. Okay. So, I got a lot out of graduate school. But I will say the Columbia program specifically. So honestly, I can't even really remember like why I specifically applied to MPA programs. In retrospect, I probably wish I had applied to business schools. But I really liked Columbia's MPA program because you could actually sort of design a curriculum that was similar to business school. But because I had worked for a foundation doing environmental sustainability, you know, for 3.5 years before I went to grad school, I approached grad school sort of going, I want to get the kind of hard skills that are going to be harder for me to get and earn on the job. So like, I'm just going to challenge myself. So that's where I took a lot of classes in things like environmental economics, accounting. The two best classes that I really enjoyed them, but also I have found them to be hugely beneficial in my career. One was corporate finance, and the other was a class on optimization, which now I work for a trading organization, which that is all about optimization. Incredibly useful. You know, I took a bunch of policy classes, super interesting, candidly, like, you know, everything that I know about issues in policy, I've learned on the job, not in school. So to me, my goal in going back to graduate school was to get a core set of skills that I didn't have, that if I wanted to go work in the business community, you know, that would be critical. I will say, I think for me, having worked in total, it was 4 years after I graduated, I went back to grad school. I also found that hugely valuable. And sometimes I honestly think it would be really fun to go back to graduate school now with 20 something years under my belt, just because I think you approach learning in a different way when you've had the benefit of having some real world work experience under your belt. I also think it's something that employers really value. But again, I mean, I think the sort of more experience you can get to figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you actually want to do, and on a day-to-day basis, like, what do you actually want to be doing in an office or in the field? Like, the more experience you can get before you decide to invest in a lot of money in a graduate degree, to me, I think it's hugely valuable.
Did that answer your question, Maeve? If it didn't, write it in the chat again. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Julia.
So this is kind of going back to what you're saying before about fostering relationships and gaining mentors. And that's, I think, since I've been a senior, something I've been really interested in, and just talking to people, hearing about their stories, and just seeing what I have to learn. And I think also it doesn't seem as, again, not as natural, but since I study history, I have some friends who do economics, and coffee chats are such a big economics finance thing, but they don't like, I kind of just coming into kind of discovering coffee chats, and like, it's not just for finance people too. You can do those and everywhere. So I want to ask kind of how you go about finding people or reaching out to people if you were to do something like that. Like, because you had just mentioned you had like a friend who works for the State Department for the past 20 years. And like, I would love to talk to a Wellesley alum who has done something like that, since I'm so interested in working abroad. But I haven't had much experience in like reaching out to people.
Yeah. It's well, and it's tough too, because, you know, people are super busy, right? You know, finding that time and that connection. And I found like it's always really helpful when a request like that comes through, you know, somebody that you know, for example. But I was going to say, like, I mean, I've already got like a few ideas. I mean, and actually just thinking about sort of different career paths. So like my friend who's at the State Department, one of my other best friends from Wellesley, is funny enough, she's a lawyer. She was a corporate lawyer, and then she moved in-house to essentially the parent company of TJ Maxx. And she is now doing basically like ESG law. She's doing all this work around like sustainability claims and green claims, and, you know, what do the regulations require you to do and substantiate, and so on and so forth. And you know, it's so funny because I'm like, how did you end up doing this? And she's like, yes, now I'm basically like doing your line of work, but, you know, for a massive retail company. She went to, well, you know, she's around. Another good friend of mine in Washington, D.C., he didn't go to Wellesley, obviously, but he's had a whole career on the Hill in Congress. working for different senators. And then he was in public service out in the state of Nevada, where he's from. But he moved back to the East Coast recently with his wife and daughter, and he is serving as a commissioner for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Go figure. So, you know, you sort of go, yeah, they're actually like people doing super interesting things. So I'm also happy to think about like following from this, like if there are certain people who you might be interested in speaking to, I'm happy to help facilitate some of those connections.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much. I was going to ask as well. I'm not sure if you have an email that like you'd be willing like for us to reach out to.
Sure.
Get that down.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to.
And share the email with all of you. I also will take this opportunity, kind of based on Julia's question, to just remind you all about the Hive, which is Wellesley's networking and mentorship platform specifically. So think of it kind of like LinkedIn, but specific for the Wellesley community. So only Wellesley students, faculty and staff and alums. Very searchable by, company, by industry, by obviously by name, by location, by, people fill out all the various information about Wellesley in terms of like, what was their major? What orgs were they involved with? What companies they've worked for. So you can really search in a very detailed way on the Hive to reach out to alums if there's something kind of specific you're interested in knowing more about. So remember that that's always an option for all students and alums.
And one thing I will just mention, so BP is actually unique in the sense that they have some very structured internship programs for students who are currently in university or college, but also for recent graduates. So the deadlines for those, I think, are in around sort of like August timeframe. So I will follow up to make sure that Destiny and Laura have that information and can share it with you. I was going to say, I was thinking about this. I was like, oh my gosh, like how many students actually want to go work for a company like BP nowadays? I mean, what I'll say is again, like the training that you get in these programs, because in my team, and again, this is a low carbon solutions team. We are focused on growing in renewable biogas and carbon markets. We have a number of sort of grads who rotate through our team and others, and the training they get is absolutely incredible. So I would just plant that seed as something to think about. Because honestly, like I think I would have really benefited from something like that. And, I'm a big believer in ultimately, like if you get good core skills, there are so many things that you can go on and do.
Other questions? Such a good conversation. Thank you for so many good questions. And obviously, Marisa, for your response.
Yeah, these are great. These are great questions.
Really insightful. Can you think for a minute and share kind of two things? When you think about the work you do now, specifically at BP or even previous to your career, what really brings you joy about what you do professionally? Yeah. And kind of the opposite side of that, which I appreciate you said, it's always important to hear everyone say there is no perfect job, right?
Yeah.
Along with that kind of joy, what are the things that you kind of, the struggles that you continue to
that bring pain?
That's right.
Yes. Throughout the course of the day.
Yeah.
Joy. Yes. So I love what I do because at the end of the day, like I do really care about environmental sustainability. I consider myself a very practical environmentalist. And I have really enjoyed figuring out how to sort of push companies to be more sustainable and actually help to sort of learn how to articulate the business value of doing that. But in the process, the thing that really brings me joy is is coaching people, coaching my team, and helping them and helping people grow. That's actually the thing that I think I get the most joy out of. And when I have seen sort of people that, you know, I've hired and coached and mentored move up and challenge themselves and, you know, move on and, you know, go do better, bigger and better things, you know, that's ultimately where I'm like, hey, you know, we're like growing the next generation. And that is incredibly meaningful. Pain, I deal with a lot of corporate bureaucracy, which can sometimes be mind numbing, but I think it sort of comes with the territory in a lot of different jobs, whether it's a corporate, NGO, government, etc. But also this is where I come back to, I do think the root of a lot of dysfunction stems from poor and unclear communication. Emails that aren't written clearly, things that aren't written down, where people leave meetings and they're like, you know, 5 different people have interpreted, you know, what happened in that meeting in five different ways. And then, you know, so it's that kind of thing where I'm like, oh, we could be so much more efficient. And that, I think, again, like learning how to think and write clearly and speak clearly, it's incredibly valuable. You can do anything with those skills.
And in your career, as you have kind of interacted and worked both as peers, as supervisors, as mentors, as, you know, kind of with people higher up, do you see that skill set being more connected to a liberal arts experience?
Yes. Indeed. And I've been really disheartened recently to read some of the articles about, you know, is liberal arts, you know, a dime? You know, do we need it anymore? And, you know, it's not in any way, shape, or form to say that like STEM is less valuable. I think they're both valuable. But I think especially in this day and age where there's so much information, so many different information sources, I find myself even reading a lot of news about energy and sustainability issues. And a lot of it I find is actually not very well researched or written based on my experience. And I think the ability to think critically and independently and also sort of, you know, be willing to challenge. You know, I think it's absolutely essential. And the more that we can continue to promote that through not only liberal arts education, but other, you know, forms of training, I think we need it for society.
Thank you. Yeah. Remember these
So, yeah,
words.
big fan.
Yeah. Because even before you kind of land your first job and your second job and your third job, like this
Yes.
conversation around your skills about communication and your strengths in this area, like these are things you bring to even your first job search, and being able to articulate those skills and how you value them and how you believe that they're important across the kind of professional landscape is really important. And I'm confident will be well received in any position that you're applying for.
Yeah. Another thing on that, that I've spent a lot of time on over my years is what I call like executive communication, how to communicate to executives who are busy, distracted, don't know a fraction of what you might know about a particular subject. How do you get the information that, you know, you need to convey across succinctly, directly, so they know exactly, like that itself is an art. And if you can learn how to, you know, a lot of that sort of will be learned on the job. But I think also if that's something that I would encourage you all to focus on that throughout your careers, because that is also something that like it will get noticed.
Excellent. I know that some people probably have 2 o'clocks to head off to, and we certainly grateful for Marissa's time.
Thank you, everyone.
For students on the call, I will send a follow-up email. Thank you for your willingness, Marissa, to share contact information. And I will make sure that students have it. We really appreciate your insights and your honesty and your candor. So thank you so much, and enjoy your dinner tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Nice
Good
to
luck
see
with
you.
finals.